Welcome to the International Project Management Day webinar series. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We will begin the webinar in just a minute. I have a few introductions and comments to make. My name is Frank Salatis, and I had developed the International Project Management Day back in 2004 for one main reason, and that was to recognize project managers and project teams and program managers for the work that they do, the contributions that they make to their organizations, and to basically raise awareness of the type of work that project managers do. And I want to just take 1 minute to mention the fact that what we're trying to do with International Project Management Day is to get people around the world to understand that the job of the project manager is a very challenging job, but it's also a very rewarding job, but it's also often overlooked, and we thought that International Project Management Day would be a way to get the attention that project managers deserve for the many hours that they work and the teams that they work with and all of the products and services that they perform. So when you have an opportunity, visit www.internationalprojectmanagementday.org to get more information about what is going on around the world in recognition of project managers. And with that, I would like to take a minute to introduce our speaker for today, Eric Verzuh. And I have actually met Eric a few times, and I am a proud owner of one of his books, the Fast Forward MBA in Project Management. And Eric will probably tell you a little bit more about this as he goes on with his presentation. But as I was saying to Eric just a few minutes ago, that I find that this particular book is an excellent way for you to be introduced to the complexities of project management in a very straightforward, easy to read, very entertaining way. And it is also a very good guide to the project management body of knowledge. Actually, it's a guide to helping you read what we call the PMBOK guide. So it's a great book. I use it all the time. I carry it with me all the time. Hopefully you'll have an opportunity to take a look at the book and maybe purchase one for your own library. So let me just do a quick introduction of Eric. Eric works with the Versatile Company, and he's known around the world for 2 best-selling books, the Fast Forward MBA in Project Management and the Portable MBA in Project Management. He began his career working in information technology. He founded the Versatile Company in 1990, and since then has worked with Fortune 500 CEOs, aerospace engineers, public school principals, and a wide range of other professionals that want to improve team performance. Their classes help to build practical skills and are conducted over the internet at public classes held in Seattle, Washington area, and at client locations. He's a certified project management professional and a board member of PM for NGOs, a nonprofit organization committed to advancing the practice of project management in developing countries. I'm pleased to introduce Eric Verzuh, and you'll see why he's well known for making project management easy to understand and apply, and we'll learn a lot about teams and working as strong leaders for our own projects. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Eric Verzuh.
Frank, thank you very much, and thanks for having me with the IPM Day webinar series. You know, I like talking about teams because project management is often viewed as a very kind of a mechanical discipline. You know, we've got a lot of calculations that we use in cost, schedule, risk. There's a lot of procedures that we can apply in contracting and procurement, and yet none of that stuff will work if our teams are not working. And so all of the science of project management basically assumes that you have a functioning team. And in fact, I'm going to suggest that a functioning team is, the bar is too low. We want a high-performance team. So today, that's our topic, is how do we get more done and have more fun doing it? Well, that's the secret that you'll have with you understand the high-performance team. And so I want to welcome all the participants out there. And just as we get moving on the content of the webinar, there is going to be some opportunity for you to interact today. It's meant to be an interactive webinar. And so what I would like you to do, and then Frank has just chatted out to everybody, but everybody please use the chat feature and just tell us what city, state, country you're listening from today. I think it's always interesting for us now that we have technology allowing us to speak to a global audience. And I'm seeing it from Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, Atlanta, Georgia, La Crosse, Wisconsin, Indianapolis, Indiana, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Las Vegas, Elk Grove, Poland, Kenmore, Washington, Winnipeg, Raleigh, St. Louis, Seattle, Exton, Pennsylvania, Chicago, Atlanta, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Wow, just amazing. Montreal, Canada, Naperville, Illinois, Dodge Center, Minnesota, San Diego, Cincinnati, Brazil, Idaho. So, wow, thank you for sending those in, because that's very just a lot of fun for me to see that we're all global. You know, this is really a global event already. So with that established, and it looks like you're all keen on how to use the chat question feature, we're going to get moving today. I want to tell you where we're headed, and we're going to start by talking about a proven framework for building a high-performance team. Understanding a high-performance team assumes that we understand the distinction between work we perform as teams and work done independently. So that'll be the first thing we do, is define this term team. Most of our time today is going to be spent on the 9 components you can build into your team. Now this is going to be very interactive. In addition to this chat feature, we're going to have polls, and I would also encourage you to get a pencil and paper out right now if you don't have it, because my goal is for you to apply these topics as we go. We'll actually be using a checklist, and we'll tell you how to get your free copy at the end of the presentation. Go ahead, feel free to send in your questions as we go, and I'll answer as many as we can within the time frame that we have today. Now, before we go any further, we're going to start with our first poll, because I want to learn just a little bit more about you and your teams. And so what you're going to see here is a poll. It says, tell me about your team. And by the way, you should be able to answer not just one, but you can answer as many of these as apply. So this helps me to just gain a sense of who's out there, not only where you're from, but kind of what the nature of your teams are, because the size of our teams, and whether they're project teams or operational teams, it really does affect some of the challenges associated with leading teams. Okay. And I can see that you're all pretty proficient at filling in polls. You know, again, what we find all the time these days is, whether it's a global webinar like this, or an online class, or face-to-face, that it's the interaction that we have during these learning events that really keep it lively and make sure that the learning is deeper and more relevant to you. So thank you for participating in this initial poll. We've got enough people who weighed in now that we're going to close that poll, and I'm going to share the answer out with you. And you'll notice as you look at this that the majority of you listening today are working on project teams. And that's kind of to be expected, given that Frank and I typically have project managers in our audiences. We also see that a large number, 51%, has 10 or fewer people, which I think of as a small team. And then 42% of you are working on teams with 11 to 30, and then 25% have over 30. And one of the things that's absolutely clear is that once you get over 30 people, the dynamics on the team does change. So I'll make some comments on that. So that's kind of helpful for me to see who's out there and where you're from and the team size you're working on. And so with that, we're going to get going and focus on defining our term. Okay? If we're going to effectively discuss team performance, we need to start with the definition of teamwork. a group of people working interdependently to produce an outcome for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. Now, two special terms here that really help us understand teams, and that's interdependent and mutually accountable. Now, a couple of weeks from now, we're going to see the great athletes of the world gather in London. And I always like to look at those Olympic athletes as an example of teamwork. And I'm going to draw on both winter and summer games as an example here. But imagine for a moment that you're on the downhill racing team. Here's the question. Are you working interdependently with your teammates? Does your performance depend on their performance? Does everybody commit to the same goal? And does the commitment of your teammates affect you? Now, shift the perspective for a moment. What if you were on a basketball team? Now, how do you answer those same questions? Does your performance depend on your teammates' performance? Do you need to work together toward the same goal? Now, there's clearly a pretty big difference, isn't it? The basketball team is absolutely interdependent, and the commitment of every player affects the performance of all other players. If you're like me and you work at a desk and your team plays around a conference room table, then we have the same distinction. We all do some work independently, like the skier, and some work interdependently. So we're already at our first lesson today. This is a key lesson about leading a team, and that is to be able to distinguish between work that you perform as a team and work that you perform as an individual. Now, clearly the work that you perform interdependently flows over and affects your individual performance. But let's get into that a little bit more, what the interdependence work. What are we doing when we work interdependently? Well, I'd suggest to you that we are solving problems. We're making decisions. Okay? Now, what kinds of problems or decisions? Well, we may be brainstorming alternatives. We could be developing project plans. I could be doing a risk response, formulating a risk response. In fact, what I would like you to do is, again, use the chat feature to send in some examples of a decision that your team recently made. Okay, so we'll just start thinking about this. What is it that we really do when we're working interdependently as a team? Okay, and I'm not seeing anybody sending this in yet. So, okay, here we go. So designing a solution, planning for risk, prioritizing requirements for delivering an agile project, prioritizing work, okay? Yep, these are all kinds of decisions that we make when we are sitting around as a team, okay? Decide to, we finished finalizing sponsors, planning work, resolving defects, okay? These are helpful. Thank you for sending those in. Making a recommendation to sponsors, choosing a new workbook for a PM training course. Hey, I know all about that. Give me a call afterwards. Performing lessons learned, and identifying space requirements for a facility. So thank you for those examples. And I think it's pretty clear then that when we sit around and we work interdependently, we are typically making decisions, solving problems. And this is the second key important lesson today, that the work we do together requires us to collaboratively make decisions and solve problems. And beyond that, the work we do together influences the work we do independently. Okay? Now, if we're going to talk about teams, it's useful to clarify what kind of team they are. They're temporary or long-term. Project teams are typically short-term groups brought together for a specific goal. You already mentioned whether you're on a project team or an operational team. In contrast, an operational team could be a department or a production group whose responsibilities endure over a long period of time. Sometimes we call these functional teams. Both kinds of teams benefit from understanding how to quickly build a strong team, but for slightly different reasons. A project team needs to come together quickly in order to produce something of value. An operational team is together for so long, their value multiplies if they can increase productivity through teamwork. So whether you work mostly on project teams, on operational teams, or both, today's topics will apply. Now, the last part of our introduction to teamwork is to recognize why strong teams are so important, and the work we do as teams is often challenging. As a project team or operational team, what kinds of challenges do you face that put pressure on your team? Okay? And for example, a lot of people right now are under a lot of cost pressure. We've seen over the last 4 years, in fact, a lot of organizations constantly trying to cut costs, and that puts pressure on us. What kind of other pressures do our teams experience? Go ahead and send in some examples. I think your examples so far have been fantastic, so please continue to send your examples in. We have, in addition to the cost constraint that I mentioned, I've got time constraints, frequent change requests, delivering on time, competition from within the industry, short project schedules, this is a recurring theme: time constraint, time constraint, time constraint, lack of sufficient funding, resource constraints, client expectations, limited resources. So those are all classic. A lot of us are trying to be innovative right now. We're trying to put something out there. Somebody mentioned competition. We need to do the best we can with limited resources and limited time frames, changing requirements with end date not changing. Yeah, that's challenging. A lot of defects detected by the client. Okay, various cultures represented in time zones. Okay, thank you for these examples. So as we realize that not only do we have to collaborate to make decisions, but our project teams, particularly our project teams, but really our operational teams too, are under a lot of pressure. Okay, so that makes it even more critical that we have strong teams. So we've established that the work we perform in teams is interdependent, typically associated with solving problems and making decisions. And it's becoming more and more important as all of us find ourselves in organizations that are rapidly evolving. That makes building strong teams extremely critical. What we do together, the interdependent work, has a big influence on how we work when we're apart. Think about this. The interaction we have while we collaborate sets the tone for us as we work apart. If you really love getting together with your team, then you'll be more enthusiastic about the work you do for them on your own. And of course, the reverse is also true. If it's a downer to work together, the independent work won't have much spark either. Now, with this definition of teamwork as our foundation, we're ready to look at the 9 components that build your team cohesiveness and effective collaborators. Okay? Now, I'm going to build a model for you here. And our model starts with the assumption that you and your team are going to get, that your team is going to get you from point A to point B. Okay? So that you're going to use a team to get you from A to B, and you're trying to get something done. Okay? So you're in this model, the team is like a bridge that takes you from A to B. Now, we've established that pressure happens on your teams. You've already told me that you've got changing requirements, imposed deadlines, geographically distributed teams, team members shared with other projects, people leaving a job but their role is not replaced. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on your teams right now, and you've told me that. And when the pressure mounts, it starts to stress the team. Okay? So here's what that team looks like under a lot of pressure. You can feel the tension here. I'm looking at this team under all this pressure, And I'm thinking they're on the verge of snapping. So what can we do? Well, our model, since we've used this bridge model, I want to extend that metaphor and say that we use a classic method to strengthen a bridge, which is an arch. And we use this model because the metaphor of an arch has a lot of implications for teams. First of all, an arch is made up of many simple stones. And each one of those stones only has value when they are all together. In fact, the power of the arch only exists when all the pieces are in place. Our team arch is the same. You see that all the components make each other stronger, but if you take one away, it dramatically weakens the arch. Each component of our high-performance team arch can be learned or developed by the team. And now I'm going to review each one of them with you. What you'll see is that the stones on the left form a positive team environment. Those on the right join to create a collaborative problem-solving capability. Okay? And all together, they'll work to strengthen your team. The keystone of the arch is leadership. And for this presentation, I'll assume that you are the leader and that you form the keystone of this high-performing team. This model provides a guideline that you can use to evaluate your current team or develop a plan for their improvement. So if you are a team leader, use this webinar today to reflect on your current team. If you aren't, pick a team that you're on right now, a team that you're a member of, and evaluate that team. In our classes, we always try to use our participants' actual work situation in the class. It's much easier and more practical to try to understand a new topic or technique if you apply it directly to something that you understand well right now. So by using your own project teams during this webinar, all of this will make a lot more sense to you. So as we describe the arch, apply it to your own team. We're going to begin on the left side of the arch with ground rules. Now, ground rules set clear expectations for team behavior. What expectations, for example, have you set for using phones, email, texting, or other communication technology during meetings? If your phone rings during the meeting, do you pick it up? And answers are going to vary among different organizations. But if you haven't set a clear guideline, you're bound to be irritating someone. Here's another example. How about this situation? Who should handle this? The team member, or should the customer be directed to the project manager? In both examples, whether it's the meeting protocol for technology or customer contact on a change, I don't really care what your ground rule is. I want you to have a ground rule. The key is that there is a ground rule. Okay? Ground rules provide clear expectations about behaviors and values. For example, in meetings, we have ground rules that describe attendance, attention, attitude, and when we set ground rules about communication among the team, that can span within the meeting and all day long, all week long. Okay. Values. I mean, right now, there's a lot of people talking about innovation, and they want to create a culture of innovation. That's a common term. But if you haven't established the value of risk-taking and that creativity is important within your team, you're probably not going to get that innovative response that you want. So ground rules, as simple as they are, provide a very strong foundation. Okay? And the neat thing is they're a great example of how the arch model works. Like each of the 9 components, ground rules can be very simple, yet they're absolutely necessary. So the first simple stone in our team arch is ground rules. Now let's move on to our next component, team identity. Teams bond around common goals and personal relationships. So my question to you, particularly if you're a team leader, is what are you doing to foster that? Well, here's a question. Internalizing the goals around your project doesn't happen without conscious effort from a team's leader. So how would you rate your team on this factor? Can everyone on your team describe the team's primary purpose and metrics for success? Okay. How would you rate your team on this factor? How about this? Remember, teams bond around common goals and personal relationships. So one of the key things we have to focus on if we're leaders is fostering personal relationships, because we need trust if we're going to effectively work with other people. And so my basic premise here is that people are more than just their job function. And I would challenge you, do you know what other expertise and experience the team members have and that they bring from prior assignments? Have you actively fostered personal relationships among team members? Remember, the quality of the personal relationships on teams directly affects the level of commitment team members exhibit. So here's an example. This is another factor that will affect personal relationships and team bonding. People aren't all the same. Have you ever noticed that? People are not all the same. We take a look at this example. These two people show up on a lot of teams. This is Mr. Facts on the left and Ms. Results on the right. Now, he thinks we're moving too fast. He wants to have more facts to make sure we understand the issue. She was ready to move on 20 minutes ago. She wants the group to take action, get moving, get results. See, the thing is, neither is right or wrong. But if they don't understand the other's style of working through a problem, they will get farther and farther apart on every issue. It's the leader's job to run the kind of team-building activities that expose these differences and help these opposites enjoy their separate strengths. In our classes, we use specific assessments and activities that recognize these factors so that people can know who they are and begin to build the relationships that provide the foundation for effective communication. Teams bond around common goals and personal relationships. As a leader, are you waiting for it to happen, or are you making it happen? Here's our third communication. Here's our third component of our high-performance teams. And again, I want you to fill in the blank for me. So good. Type in the answer. Blank is the #1 communication skill to build a cohesive, productive team. Tell me what you think it is. Okay. Thank you. Okay, I've got a lot of people pitching in here with answers, and we've got listening, 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 trust, listening, trust, respect, transparency, listening, listening, respect, listening, respect, listening, listening. So I'm gonna go with listening, and listening is the #1 communication skill to build a cohesive, productive team. Now, and thank you for pitching in with your answers. So why is listening the #1 communication skill? Because listening generates trust. So for all of you who said trust is #1, well, I would tell you listening generates trust. When I actively try to understand you, that shows I respect you. If you return the favor, the respect grows. It's the key to gaining multiple perspectives. Remember that we're collaborating here. We're working together to solve a problem that we can't solve on our own or produce a result that no one of us could create. How am I going to get the value of a team if I don't work hard at understanding other points of view? Build trust. Get better results. And that's all from listening. So, example. Look at this man. You can see that he is listening. Okay? First of all, he isn't talking. And he's looking right at the person who's speaking, leaning slightly forward, Everything about his behavior shows he is intently focused on understanding her. What about your team? As teams are challenged to be creative, trust becomes even more important. It's easy to talk about trust, but how do you actually build it? So this is one specific skill you can foster. So here's my question for you, and you don't have to send in your answer on this, but I want you to think about this. Do members of your team routinely practice active listening? You can reflect on that and say, well, you know, yes they do, or no they don't. And if you can't think of specific examples, they may not be doing it. Okay? Here's the second test. During a disagreement within your team, do people work harder at explaining their point of view or understanding another team member's position? Okay, during disagreements. I would tell you that if you're telling me that people work harder at explaining their point of view, then they need to work harder at listening. Okay, because during a disagreement, it's the listening that gets us through, and it gets us through that conflict to understanding on the other side. So those are two simple tests for you. Do you see that listening exists? And again, this is a skill. So in our classes, we have multiple ways to practice listening skills, and listening isn't just a leader skill. It's a skill that everyone on the team needs. Here's our fourth component of a high-performance team, and it's meeting management. Look, teamwork is people working together. That's why meeting management is a must-have skill. Here's the thing. You know this stuff. How many times have you had somebody say, does the meeting have a purpose? Does it start and end on time? Do you have an agenda that sequences the topics? Do you record decisions and assignments? I mean, we have heard that these are the right ways to run meetings, haven't we? But the question is, are you doing it? Okay? If you're not running a meeting and using all these techniques, that means that you're probably not running the kind of meetings that people leave saying, wow, that was an effective use of my time. And isn't that really what everybody wants? Everybody wants to say, you know, I really like getting together with this team. It's very productive. Okay? We're all too busy to have unproductive meetings. Now, we've kind of hit the halfway point on our webinar. We've hit the halfway point on our team arc. Every one of these components works with the other ones. And so together, you can see they build a positive team environment. Now, next we're going to start on the bottom of the right side of the arch. And each one of these components contributes to our ability to work together to solve a problem and to make a decision. The first one is team problem-solving techniques. Team problem-solving techniques generate better decisions faster. It helps us to be more productive. Okay? So let's start with the good news. A team with diverse skills and experience can produce far more innovative ideas than one person working alone. I think we all accept that. Okay? Here's the bad news. Mr. Facts and Ms. Results will not naturally work well together. Even after recognizing they have different styles, they still need a common approach or they will drive each other crazy. So, are you helping your team work together? Structure the problem. Keep everyone focused on the same issue. Use team decision techniques. It's the only way to compare apples and oranges. And we can, again, this is a learned skill that we as team leaders can understand and learn and practice. Let's give you an example. I recently facilitated a meeting. It was a strategic planning workshop for a small executive team. So here's the thing. They've been discussing the same problems repeatedly for months and kept winding up with no answers and no progress. So what did I do differently? Well, I structured the discussion. Now, that meant that the discussion took several hours, but that let us really dig into one issue at a time with common focus from every person. And again, if the focus started to stray off someplace else, it was my job to bring them back and stay on focus. when it came time to make decisions, we were able to lay out the variables in a matrix. And that matrix allowed us to illustrate why some options were appealing, but they were ultimately not as appealing as other options. And this is why they've been into this conundrum in the first place, is they had multiple good options, but they couldn't pursue them all. And what they needed was a structured decision approach to lay out their options so that they could choose the best one. As a result, they left with the confidence that they thoroughly examined the issues and had a unified view of how to move forward. And that was reinforced when they went back to their office and they could clearly communicate to the rest of their team where they were headed and why. Now, in our classes, we teach a variety of these team decision techniques. It is actually not uncommon to have to do this, to have to compare apples and oranges, and structured techniques make it easier to do that. Now, that was one key component of a high-performance team. A second key component of collaboration for high-performance teams is their ability to make decisions and to use more than one method to make a decision. Teams should be able to use a variety of techniques for that. Now, a common approach is consensus. So I'd like to use a poll here to test our understanding of that common term to see if we have a common understanding. So here's the poll question that's going to come up, and after we read through this, so don't send it in your response in as a chat or a question. Don't do that. Instead, wait. I'm going to set up a poll in a minute here. Just read through this. The team has reached consensus when. So go ahead and read that, and in just a moment I will set up a new poll and you'll be able to weigh in. And that way we can see what everybody says about this. Okay? So we've looked at the answers. I hope you figured out which one you're going to answer. And I'm going to launch the poll now. And you'll see that, there you go. And you can see that the poll doesn't give us quite enough room to enter in all the options, the full text, but you're doing a great job of responding to that. Now, one of the interesting things about consensus, and this is why I answer this, is that a lot of teams do rely a lot on consensus. But if they're not skilled at it, then it can really bog them down. So all the advantages of a consensus decision-making technique start to get lost as the disadvantages overtake them. And the disadvantage of the consensus approach is that it takes a lot of time. And to get input from everybody can take a lot of work, and it takes skill. Okay? So let's take a look here. I've got just about everybody weighed in on this. I'm going to close it. I'm going to share it out. And what you'll notice here is that pretty much everybody picked C, or at least a high percentage of you picked C, and that is the correct answer. Okay. A is where we get into trouble. If we need a unanimous agreement, we get into trouble. That's not consensus. B is a legitimate decision approach, but it's not consensus either. C, every team member agrees that their views have been fairly heard and can support the will of the group. And that really points out that consensus is a process. Consensus is a process. Okay? So so thanks for participating in that. Okay. Now, once we understand that decision making is important, with the next logical skill set that we need for our teams is the ability to manage conflict. I'm telling you, conflict is natural and it's necessary. Now, we all understand why it's natural. I don't know if we all understand why it's necessary. Okay? It's necessary because we want to get all the different perspectives. I want full engagement from all the people looking at that are involved in the project and involved in a discussion. I'm going to come back to a question that was asked about consensus in a few minutes. Let me talk about this right now. High-performance teams accept conflicts, a natural and necessary part of the process, and that's risky because personal relationships and commitment to the team decisions can suffer if we have a really divergent point of view here and we don't manage conflict well. But if we avoid conflict, we're avoiding the hard work required to generate the best decisions. So clearly teams need skills to do conflict resolution. So take a look at these questions. And this will help you gain a sense of whether your team has a healthy approach to conflict. First of all, do you regularly encounter disagreement? If you do, that's actually a good sign, because if you don't encounter disagreement, that means that people are withholding, or you're not getting full participation, or you don't have enough points of view. Okay? I would expect if I've got an energetic, intelligent team engaged in my project that we have disagreements. Secondly, do team members feel free to voice conflicting points of view, particularly when they disagree with the leader? Again, if they feel like they can't disagree with the leader, that's not healthy. Do disagreements linger week after week and become the topic of discussion outside of team meetings? That is not healthy. Okay? We need to be able to let those disagreements get aired in the meeting and resolve them right there so that they don't fester and poison the relationships that we've worked so hard to build. So you can see that problem solving, decision styles, and conflict are very related, and the components that make up a positive team environment are also critical to cohesive teams that collaborate to make effective decisions. So far, all of our ARCH model clearly is working together. Now, our last component amplifies these. Continuous learning keeps the team improving their processes and their productivity. So think about this. Have you learned anything about your team today? How would you rate your team on the 8 components we've discussed so far? Would the whole team agree? How often do you monitor these factors? Do you use techniques for quick team feedback? Do your ground rules reinforce creativity and constant improvement? So continuous learning is an important part of a high-performance team, because it says if we're going to effectively collaborate, we need to learn from our experience. You know, project teams that review these kinds of factors, kind of how the health of the team and the way their strength of interaction, these are the teams that grow rapidly and stay strong. In fact, you know, Frank Salatis, when he introduced me, mentioned that I have a book or 2 out, and in the Fast Forward MBA in Project Management, we actually have a couple of, there's over 20 downloadable forms in there, and a couple of them are team health checks. So it doesn't have to be super complex, but if you check in and monitor the effectiveness of your team and take corrective action, all of these factors that we've just discussed get better. Okay? Now, what have we just done? We've just walked through 4 different components of the high-performance team that together help us improve our collaborative capability. You can see that the capabilities on the right build our collaborative capability. On the left build the positive team environment. So they have to work together. Right? This goes back to the ARCH concept that any one of these techniques, when they're missing, weakens the entire structure. Now, so far, all the components that we've discussed have been team characteristics. And the team has ground rules, the team listens, the team knows how to reach consensus. So clearly the leader is setting the example in each of these, but if only the leader has the skill, then the team is not in high performance mode. So really reflect on that for a moment, particularly if you're a team leader. Are you taking on all of these yourself, or are you trying to build the capability of the team? Now, leadership is the ninth component, and it is different than the others. That's why it is the keystone of the arch. There are many leader responsibilities. One of them is to consciously build these skills and characteristics into the team, and there are other responsibilities as well. Let's take a look. Teams need leaders. Somebody must put the group in motion. They focus the goals, facilitate the plan, and maintain forward momentum. The energy, the attitude, the commitment of the team rarely rise above those of the leader. Leadership can be difficult to describe, but usually we know it when we see it in action. And so I'm going to offer to you three things that I would look for in a leader, and three things that I try to personify myself if I'm in the position of leadership. First of all, the energy you display every day that takes a group of people and forms them into a united team. You put the team in motion. Secondly, teams need to pay attention to details. Their roles require them to be very task-focused. Leaders maintain the direction and ensure that all of the energy is aligned with the goal. And on the best teams, people have their hearts in their work. Now that only happens when you put your heart in first. Show people that you know who they are, how they contribute, and that you value their effort, attitude, and results. When you are in the leader role, you are in the spotlight. Every action you take is an example to the team. The high-performance team arch has 9 components. 8 are team characteristics. The keystone of the arch is the leader. And so to summarize our arch model, we introduced the arch model as a way of adding strength. We've used this model to help build teams for several years. I recently, though, learned something new about arches. And that is to strengthen an arch, you add pressure. Now, we know our teams experience pressure, but if all the components are in place, your team can stand up to the pressure. And think about it. Some of your best experiences, some of your best work experiences are being a part of a team that was under pressure that performed well. That's when all these pieces are in place. Now, here's another interesting example of an arch that I saw recently. This is Pont du Gard. It's a Roman aqueduct in Provence, France. It's one of the largest existing aqueducts. And I don't know how well you can see that. Those little people there on the bridge crossing, that just gives you a sense for the scale. This thing's over 150 feet tall, and it's all arches, and there's no mortar. It's all simple stones stacked on top of each other. The power of the arch is really exemplified in that aqueduct. Have you been using the components of a high-performance team to reflect on your own team during this webinar? Can you see how it provides a guideline for improving an existing team or for quickly building a new team? Before we're finished, I'll show you how to get this quick checklist that corresponds to the model. Okay. But first, let me just ask this. Do you have it all together, or do you need some help? Okay. And this is the part of the webinar where I say, look, our business is to help teams get better and to help project managers get better. Okay. So if you need some help, let me know. You've got my phone number on the bottom of the screen. You've got a website on the bottom of the screen. We work on every one of these components in our classes and as well as our typical project management classes. So we can help. Now, with that in mind, we're ready to start taking some questions. And I'm going to send you, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and we've got time for several questions. And I'll try to go back and touch on some of the questions that have already been answered as well previously. sent in as well previously. But now we've got time for your questions. So go ahead and send those in as you've been sending in your other comments, and we'll do our best to answer those. While you're sending those in, I'll just again remind you that our business is to help you perform your projects better, and we'd love to do that. Okay, so let's get around to answering some questions. One of the questions that came in earlier was, can you give an example of a team decision technique? A great team decision technique is a matrix that weighs, has our options across the columns and our requirements on the rows. Now that's a simple matrix that allows you to do a weighted evaluation comparing each different option against the requirements of the alternative. And that's just one example then of the techniques we use. One of the other matrix that I like is to plot points against two axes. One axis might be complexity, another axis might be value. And so when you start to plot your options against complexity and value, you start to see the least complex, most valuable options start to emerge. Okay, so that's what I say. There's a lot of ways to do this. Okay, there's a couple of questions about PMI PDUs, and we are definitely going to put up some information about PMI PDUs before this. Let's see. A question comes in about getting a copy of the presentation. What we won't put out a copy of the presentation, but again, I'd be happy to share the high performance team checklist, and I'll tell you how to get that in just a minute. Another question comes in that says, all the listening techniques that we usually learn apply to one-to-one conversations, but how does this apply to teams? That's a pretty good question. I think one of the most powerful examples I've seen of how effective listening techniques apply to teams was in a project that I was on several years ago that had all PMPs on the team. It was a PMI committee, and one of the guys on the team, his name was Steve, was very effective at reflective listening. And so no matter what the discussion was going on, if it started to just kind of get heated up, and when people were kind of talking over each other, Steve was able to just cut right in there and say, so excuse me, I'm not sure that we're clear on Tom's point, or Eric, can I just summarize your point? And by being reflective in his listening techniques and making sure we all heard each other, then we were able to continue to move on with a lot of progress. So while the techniques are typically taught and practiced one-to-one, they can be applied in a small group setting. Now, earlier when we talked about having teams that were over 30 people, that's a whole different dynamic, and team decision making and team problem solving really can't even effectively be done with teams that are over 30 around a table at one time. That's a whole different breakdown has to happen. Here's another question. What if the boss disagrees with the team decision? Does it mean the boss overrides the decision? So this is a good question. It kind of gets to the heart of team decisions, and that is that we have to ask who has the authority to make the decision. Typically the boss, the team leader, has the authority, and it is up to the boss to decide if he or she is going to share that authority with the team. So consensus decisions are made by the team. And that means that the boss consciously says, look, I'm going to share this responsibility and the authority to make the decision with the group. And at that point, if the boss doesn't like the decision, if you take that authority back, you've broken trust. And that's pretty dangerous. Okay? So as a boss, as the leader who has the authority, if you want to share that decision authority with the group, there's a right time to do it, but beware that you can't get it back. Okay, that's how I would approach that. So The other piece of that, though, is that if you really want the input of a group, be very clear up front. Look, lay it out there. Here's the project at this juncture. Here's the decision that needs to be made. I would like to have the honest, unvarnished advice of the entire group. I would want to listen to it carefully. I will be at the end of the day, I will make the decision, but I feel like we can have a really thorough, honest exchange of ideas. And that's a legitimate way to approach it. And I think a lot of project leaders use that technique, and people trust you and respect you for laying it out like that because it's extremely clear what you're asking them to do. Let's see. I'm looking at some of these questions here. So does the leader hold the spotlight in an agile team framework? That's an interesting question. So remember, the spotlight comment is this. Everybody knows who the leader is, okay? And in an agile framework, the roles can often be quite well defined. But we know who has the most authority, right? Whose responsibility it is to lead and to inspire. That person is always in the spotlight, okay? The way that you conduct yourself when you walk in the office influences other people, and that's what I mean by being in the spotlight. So in an agile framework, even though there may be specific roles and processes, there's still a person who's a leader, and that person's always in the spotlight. There's a question that says, how often would the performance of a team be checked? Daily is too often, but I cannot remember the whole series of happenings after half a month. So, how do we do this? So this goes back to the question is really focuses on continuous learning and how often do we do that. So I would suggest that, first of all, do try to use a consistent tool to do that, some kind of survey, and again I mentioned there's a couple in the book that you can use. But if you do that, sometimes some of them take 5 minutes at the end of a meeting, okay? Sometimes it would take 30 minutes, and you do it maybe once a month as you start up the project and you start up the team, and then as the team functions better and better, you do it less and less, okay? So these are great questions, but we're running out of time. I want to make sure we finish up today, okay? One of the things that I want to do before we wrap up is give you the chance to get the high performance team checklist. So I'm going to give you a chance to say whether you like it or not. Go ahead, and I think you've got that. So if you'd like the checklist, let us know. If you don't, say no thank you. If you think that I can help or anybody on my team can help, whether it's building high-performance teams or attending a great Microsoft project course, and you want us to contact you, let us know, and we'd be happy to do that. Okay, and so it looks like we've got about everybody who's interested in the checklist pitching in here and telling us whether they want that or not. So let me wrap up by making one last comment about high-performance teams. One last comment about high-performance teams. Productivity is important. We cannot deny that. I think we all agree that. And we can see how building a cohesive team with strong problem-solving skills increases productivity. Okay? I think we've all come to that conclusion. I hope you have by now. But strong teams are more than productive. They are fun. In a world where most of us spend more time with coworkers than family members, a positive team environment can be the greatest gift you give your team. So good luck with your projects and your teams. Frank, I'm going to turn it back to you. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this program today. And Frank, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Thanks for the presentation. While you were answering the questions that were coming in, and I know that there were quite a few, I just made a point and sent it out in chat that your Chapter 10 in the book, the Fast Forward MBA in Project Management, 4th edition, addresses specifically many of the items that you had talked about in building a high-performance project team. So those of you that have the book, you may want to take a look at that. The Arch is also in that book. For a high-performance team framework, and it's an excellent reference. So that's something you may want to take a look into. Regarding PDU information, we're looking at this particular presentation as a Category B PDU, and the information on the slide is what you have to input when you go to the PMI website to input your PDU. You need to know the name of the program, the 9 components of high-performing teams. It's Category B. Provider name is Versatile, the project management company, today's date. I have selected the process groups of planning, executing, and controlling as the main process groups that are associated with this presentation, and the main knowledge areas are communication, human resources, and time management. The content is applicable to all industries, so click on all industries, and of course the provider address is shown and telephone number. Those I believe are optional. But that's the information that you need. I was on the website yesterday and checked the PMI, so you will get your 1 PDU, Category B, if you follow that information when you are completing the information for the PDU. Okay, another thing is just remember that November 1st is International Project Management Day. It is the first Thursday every year. If you have an event that you are planning, if you would please let us know by going to www.internationalpmday.org. We are going to continue with these webinars, and we will continue to either have a organization sponsor a PDU or arrange through PMI to get a PDU for these presentations. There's 2 parts to the webinars. One is to promote International Project Management Day, and also is to provide a way to give back some information and some education to the many project managers that are out there working all around the world. One bit of homework for all of you is to let other people know about these webinars, pass on the information about the website to your organizations and to your colleagues, and we would appreciate any feedback that you have. And again, I'd like to thank Eric for taking the time to share his expertise in the area of building high-performance teams. And this particular program is being recorded, and we'll make that available as soon as we can. We'll get information up on the website about how you can actually access and listen to this recording. So again, Eric, thank you very much. Any last comments before we close out?
You know, again, I would just reinforce that high-performance teams are the foundation that make all the rest of the project management discipline work for us. So pay attention to the relationships and the people, build the trust, and all the other mechanics of project management start to get easier. Thanks again for having me.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you appreciated the time that we spent here today. Again, it's really focused on you, the project manager. We're looking for ways to really show how valuable and how important the project manager is to any organization, and to find ways to make yourself an indispensable part of your organization. You're the go-to people. You're the people that get it done. Feel good about yourselves, and make sure to remember your project teams and other project managers on November 1st, 2012, International Project Management Day. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you being here, and we'll see you on the next webinar.